Lindsey Wilson College Professor of Psychology Steve Scott. You're joining us in the Thomas D. Clark Reading Room of the Katie Merrill Library for Lindsey Wilson Conversations. And the way this works is you get to enjoy a beverage of your choice. The beverage you've chosen is a Diet Pepsi, and the topic you're going to discuss is positive parenting. Tying that into the current events of the day, it was recently reported in the media that 34 children have been abandoned during 2008 in Nebraska. Why were those children abandoned in Nebraska?
What happened in Nebraska is an unfortunate situation where the legislature, under good intentions, passed, as many states have, a protection law of newborn children, allowing people who have recently had a newborn child and for whatever reason cannot raise the child to return the child within 3 days of the child's birth to a hospital and to not face prosecution for, in effect, abandoning the child. And most states have this kind of law. What happened in Nebraska is Nebraska did not place the within 3 days limit on the law. And what has happened is we have found out, very unfortunately and very tragically, that parenting can become so difficult, so painful, so unable to continue, that we have had large numbers of children going all the way up to legal age of 18 being taken to hospitals in Nebraska and under this law abandoned by their parents or guardians because the parents and guardians can no longer, for a variety of different kinds of reasons, care for them or feel that the child is dangerous to them or that they're dangerous to the child.
How does positive parenting play into this?
Well, obviously, I think all of us, when we started our families, or when we thought about starting families years before we did start them, had the idea that, and it is a good idea, and it does happen, that parenting can be, and it is, one of the greatest joys that one can have in life. And I like to think of that work that a person does, or that parents do, under the term of positive parenting.
How does one plan to be a parent?
Well, obviously, the easier part for many people is the actual conception issue. But I think the one of the most important things to do is that as one is thinking about becoming a parent, is to look at what are the resources that are available to a person, what kind of a relationship does one have with the person that one is going to have that child with, what kind of financial resources do they have, health insurance resources do they have, and to look at what kind of a relationship a person does want to have with their child over the course of years. Because when I talk to people who are about to have their first child or people who have recently had their first child, they use words like respect and friendship to talk about the relationship they eventually want to have. But that is a long way in the distance, and there's lots of obstacles, I think especially in today's world, that really can impede a person's ability to make that happen. I mean, look at what happens to an average couple on having their first child. Here they take home from the hospital the most complex organism that has ever been developed, 1,000 times more complex than the largest computer you have. There's no instruction manual. There's no money-back guarantee. We do very little training in our Western society of training people how to be an effective parent. Many people have only however they were parented, whether they thought that was good, whether they thought that was bad, and if they remember how that was done. And so you take all of that potential for problems, and you add to it the financial strains that are a big problem for many young couples starting out in the world. You add the problems of an unhealthy child or of a strain in the marriage, and you start off a relationship with your child that can be very, very problematic and that can be leading you right down the road that results in the kind of travesty we see happening, in the Nebraska situation, and not to the kinds of things that parents want for their children and that children want in their relationship with their parents.
How helpful are parenting classes?
Parenting classes are a wonderful resource. There's a lot, of course, which, to quote the experts, if there are such people in that area, that they can't tell you, and that you either have to find out on your own or that you have to adapt to your individual situation. But it is so helpful in a number of different kinds of settings, and oftentimes at very reasonable cost. I mean, sometimes parents hear from psychologists that, you've got to constantly be rewarding a child as if you're giving the child something. Or oftentimes with a child, what a child needs most is simply the encouragement of a parent saying thank you, a parent noticing that the child is trying, noticing that the child is contributing, noticing when a child is well behaved. I'm a big believer that even the worst behaved children, and I've had some experience in working with parents who felt they did have the worst behaved children on the face of the earth, that really one of the big problems is that they've gotten so in the habit of noticing all the misbehavior of the child, is that they weren't noticing the dozens of things that the child was doing each day, which could be encouraged and should be encouraged and would lead to more good behavior. I'm such a believer that so many things in life we get into habits about. And if we get into a good habit, that's good, because then we keep doing the good habits over and over again, and we build more good habits. But man, when you get into a bad habit and you get something going in the wrong direction, you can get to the situation where you literally end up with a war with your child, and then everyone loses. The child loses, you lose, your spouse loses, everyone loses in that kind of a situation.
In addition to classes, are there other alternatives, other sources of information, such as books that people can consult?
Certainly, Dwayne, and I would commend many of those to parents. There certainly are some things on the fringe edges that aren't as widely received or accepted, but there's many positive kinds of resources for the average set of parents. One does not have to have some kind of a degree in higher education or something like that in order to read and understand and apply the techniques. The book I gave to my son, who has absolutely no interest in psychology whatsoever, but is a very readable and a very proven tool over the last 60 years, is a book called Children the Challenge by a man by the name of Dreikers, and it's available at any bookstore or online. But Children the Challenge by Dreikers, it takes a very positive kind of an approach with very simple kinds of steps that a person can read about and see various situations in which they could apply it.
Professor of Psychology Steve Scott, thank you for joining us for Lindsey Wilson Conversations.
Thank you.